So I got a ship one time. I was on the boat as a dunkerman, and she was running up the Mediterranean and back to England and carrying iron ore. And the dunkerman, when the ship is at sea, he's got to grease the engines and look after that everything runs well, the bearings run cool, and so on. And when in port, he had to work a lot of overtime to keep steam up in what I call the donkey boiler for the winches. And, I was doing fine there, famous. One time we called in Algiers, that's in the Mediterranean, and I went ashore one day and had a look round in the, done a bit of window shopping, and I looked in one window where there was a wine cellar underneath, and there was bottles of brandy and whiskey and all sorts of drinks in the window and prices unmarked. And you know, a bottle of brandy cost only 1 shilling. So I goes in and buys myself a couple of bottles of brandy and took them back aboard ship. And I had to work a good bit of overtime, and then about breakfast time, so when before eating breakfast, I had a bit of a nip, and it gave me a good appetite, and I was working away quite happily until at length, after about 6 or so months, I saved up a few pounds of money, and I got fed up of going to sea because I had no relatives or no home to go. Just where I hung my hat was my home, and I thought I'll save up a bit and book a trip to New Zealand. And the liner took about 6 weeks to come out to New Zealand, so I thought I'll have a good holiday. And in New Zealand, I learned that everything was something like in England. They were speaking English and was using English money, and the union fees and everything was interchangeable. So I paid 12 months in advance my union fees, and went one time to Edinburgh. I went in the shipping office and bought myself a second-class ticket to Wellington. Cost me 17 golden sovereigns. And at the same time, I asked the shipping master if I could get naturalized as a British subject, because I had been over 5 years on the British ships, and I didn't like to come out to New Zealand as an alien, as a foreigner. But the shipping master said, "My good man," he said, "you intend to stay in New Zealand. Why not do it there?" He says, "You get naturalized in New Zealand as a New Zealander, and that will be that." So I says, "All right, thank you very much." So away I went, and I had 2 months to wait for the Corinthic. She was sailing out to New Zealand, the old Show Seville liner. So the 2 months, I didn't have no money enough to stay ashore. I took another ship, what I call a weekly boat, and they just run just 3 days at sea was the longest, and then back to port again. But you had to provide your own tucker, buy your own things to eat. Well, that suited me down to the ground. I could eat what I like, but the cook didn't cook anything for you. If you wanted something cooked, you could put in a pie dish or somewhere and prepare it with some onions, a few spuds, and leave it in the galley. Then while you are at watch, the cook would put it in the oven, and when you come up, it was ready. So that was good. And when the time came, I got paid off and hopped on the train and went down to London. About 3 days before the Corinthic sailed, and every night I went to the sailor's room, paid 6 pence for a sleep at night, and daytime I was free to do as I like. And I waited there for those 3 days, and when the Corinthic sailed, I went aboard then. Eventually we shoved off and went out to sea, and went out through the English Channel into the Atlantic, and we struck 2-3 rough days, and the ship was pitching and tossing a good bit, and there were a lot of emigrants aboard, especially Irish people, and they were all as sick as the dogs, never been to sea before, but I quite enjoyed it. I was all right. And then eventually they got all right, and so we carried on. And then I forgot to tell you once before we left left Europe. I was in London. I went on Sheepside one night, did a bit of window shopping. I bought myself a new razor and strap and brush, the whole caboose for 10 bob, which was very high price those days. And I came to an art shop. They were exhibiting some white glossy postcards with bunches of flowers and Christmas greetings or birthday greetings or everything like that, and not painted on but carved into the paper with a sort of sharp carving knife. And I thought, oh well, I could do that too. So I went in and bought a couple of hundred of them and a carving tool and took it with me. And it was so quite a good amusement for me aboard ship. I used to do a lot of those cards there, and the passengers get to see them and like them, and they wanted to buy them. Well, anyway, we made a bargain. I sold them all for 6 pence each, and there I made quite a bit of pocket money. And originally I just had 4 golden sovereigns, which I sold in a belt and carried round on me wherever I went. And I landed with these in Wellington. Getting in Wellington, I was absolutely stranger, didn't know where to go, because we had to go through the customs office first. And the customs officer says to me, "What's in your bags?" I was traveling very light, as much as I could just carry. And I dropped them on the counter. I said, "You better have a look, and be not telling any lies." So he took a piece of chalk and crossed them and said, "All right, go on." Well, I turned around and asked him if I could leave them there until I could find out somewhere where I was going to stay. So he gave me a receipt and took care of him, and I went ashore. And I wandered up and down the street and had a look in several eating shops and looked at the menus, and eventually I went to some place where a lot of the wharf workers was going to have their meals. And there was a good 4-course dinner on for 2 shillings. So I went in and had a good old tuck-in, and I asked the landlady if they had a spare room, whether I could stay there for a few days. So she said, "Sure thing." So she took me upstairs and showed me a small room with a bed in. And I went to the customs office, got my gear and put it in there, and I was there for about 2 days. Then I started to wander down the wharf and made myself accustomed to the ships and one thing or another. I had no idea where to go to look for any other job. And going in the wharf gates, I noticed there was a big blackboard, and there was a ship's name, Mararoa, written on with a white chalk, and said 2 firemen wanted. So I went in and applied for them, and in due course they said, "Oh yes, it's all right. You can go home and after dinner come and turn to and start working, and we shall sign you on." So I came back after dinner and changed my clothes and went down in the engine room. I had some odd jobs to do there, and I got back up again in the evening because I didn't go ashore. I had nowhere to go. So I had a good wash, changed into different clothes, and I just sat about there and had tea and went to bed. And it was on a Saturday, that was. And Saturday night, about 11 o'clock, the ship used to sail Wellington for Littleton, and arriving Littleton about 11:30 if things went all right. So I stayed on the ship for about 9 months. I joined there early in January, and I finished up somewhere about mid-September. And I was getting £10 a month wages and overtime if we worked any, and I thought, oh well, I'll soon get rich now. The wages in England only was £3.5 a month, and keep, of course. And the keep was totally different from the ship on the New Zealand coast. There was plenty to eat and good tucker, plenty chips and fish and meat and everything of the best, and plenty of it. Well, I was quite happy.